Nerd morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today we are going to be talking about the Hunger Games trilogy, and we're going to be diving into the books, not necessarily the movies, though obviously there are certain things that they pull and tie in there. But I have read these books like maybe 5+ times now. The first Hunger Games book came out in 2008. It is a futuristic dystopian world where people from all these different districts are selected and put into a competition that's essentially a big gladiator fight, and they fight to the death. And they put in these young children there, and that's who goes through these battles called the Hunger Games. And this is dark. I mean, think of that. That is really, really dark. And when this came out in 2008, and I was, I was done with high school, entering into kind of the real world, going to college, things like that, I just did not grasp how dark or how intense this was. They have these people, the individuals in the Capitol, and the people in the Capitol are individuals who have a cushy life. They are somewhat sheltered, and they have this entertainment of these heroes who come out as like the gladiator winners of these Hunger Games, and they have these really big spectacle arenas and fights, and they watch people kill other people for entertainment. And that is absolutely barbaric, yet they're also so sheltered and so privileged and all these type of things that they just can't really see it for what it really is. And I think me as a younger reader, I was like, oh, I love the action scenes. I love how all these intense battles and this stuff. And that was kind of where my thinking and my approach was for this series. And I don't know, maybe it was this time, this reading, that I felt like I finally grown up as a reader or something. And after reading it 4 or 5 times, but the intrigue and the growth of the characters and the struggle and the fear, those were the things where they really, really resonated with me. And so I think the first book was originally my favorite because it had all the action and it drove the story in a very particular way. And then in the second book, I'm like, oh my gosh, well, can't they go to the fighting? I'm halfway through the book and they haven't even started yet. And wow, my approach and my perspective is so not like that now, because all of the battle that they have between the Capitol and politics versus Katniss and how she's being sucked in on all of these different things that go on in the story, that my perspective just totally changed. And I feel like that's a really cool thing to discover, and I really value the idea and the opportunity of returning to books, re-looking and re-examining them, because I think that as we reread books, we're able to get deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, this series, I also had in my head this strong, heroic female character that was so cool because there's female representation, and they got to have this cool action hero, and I'm all for that. But this time I saw Katniss as a strong character, a survivor, but not one who was really able to make choices. She was manipulated constantly, either by the game makers or the Capitol or President Snow or her own mentors or the rebellion. She was always put into a position that she could not escape, and things were happening to her rather than her making things happen. And even in the last book, when she's like, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna track down Snow, and they have their team and they go out and try to infiltrate the Capitol, ultimately, even that through all of the sacrifices, it didn't really amount to much. And that was her biggest independent choice that she got to do. Most of the other things when she's going out and being heroic inside of the Capitol, at parties or things like that, like she's forced into these situations. And while she's fighting in the Hunger Games in books 1 and 2, both of them, she is really being guided and pushed and manipulated. And I think that is so, so important to the message and ideas of this story, is that they are in a world where you don't have as much freedom to choose. And I think that is a really poignant concept here, because why are they fighting? Why are they having all of these like contentions, and why is this world that they're living in so much of a dystopia? And part of that, I think, is just her inability to choose. And she does have different rebellious elements, and they're strewn about throughout the games, through her hunting out outside of her district. All of those types of things really do tell us that she is this strong and this dynamic character and individual, but really I think so much of her life is being dictated, and I think that's something that's just worth noting. One of the things that I also feel like really hit me this time through the series that I don't think it really did before was just how heavily involved this is with mental illness, with disability, with trauma like PTSD and things like that, because there is so much of that in this book. With Katniss and Peeta's mentor, like he is a drunkard because he wants to shut things out. Through the other of the champions that we see, who they're the ones who survived the Hunger Games, like in book 2, all of them have severe trauma that has affected the ways that they're able to function. And we definitely see that with Katniss, we see that with Peeta, and it's really, really intense. And we get elements of that just throughout the world and the environment itself, like with Katniss's mother, and how she wasn't able to really parent because she was dealing with trauma and struggling through that. And I think that is just something that I don't feel like most contemporary young adult books really, really dive into. And this series, I have to remind myself, is focused on people who are probably around 15, because she starts out her adventures as a 16-year-old, and then in the later books she's around 17 years old. And so usually a young adult novel is targeted towards people who are about 1 to 2 years younger than the main character. That way they're kind of looking up to them and admiring them and all of that. And in this book series, though, there is so much heavy concepts there with trauma and struggles like that, that I feel like this is a little bit more of a mature ideas that are being explored. Also, I think that there's some really, really big things about government and power that are being discussed. Like, we have this really strong central government in the capital, and then we have all of these different branches with the different districts, and they are pushed down, they are subservient, yet they also are the thing that keeps the capital running and flowing. And the people in the capital are pretty much shown as people who, yeah, they have jobs or they do different things, but they're very comfortable and in ideal situations, and they're on the backs, like living off of the backs of these other communities, these different districts. And like, I think there's some strong parallels and commentary about how that type of system works in the real world, and that's definitely a thing that we see. Like, there's some also really like strong parallels, of course, with the gladiator aspect. Like, that's a direct relationship. Susan Collins, the author, talks about how this was some of where she was pulling that idea, was that gladiator nature and history that we've had in the past inside of the world. And kind of at the end of this grouping of thoughts and ideas that I have with this series is just how tragic the ending of this is. That this character that we grow to love, we root for, we disagree with, we struggle through all of these experiences, like at the end of the story, it is a tragedy. And it is somewhat tempered by this, like, years later, seeing that she actually did end up having children, her and Peeta have a family, but the sense that I get from this is that she's not still happy. She is still broken inside, and she might be functioning. And that, like, they really undertone that with her kids are out playing, and she in her back of her head is like, but they're playing on a graveyard that they don't really realize is actually a graveyard, and that's because of all the mass graves because of the things that were destroyed there. And like, that was a hard thing, even though that was supposed to be the happy part. After you have her sister Primrose, like, she is murdered at the end, and it's absolutely tragic, and it destroys her relationship with her really close friend Gale, and like, everyone considers her to have gone insane, and that's why she changed things during the execution of Snow. Like, there's so much that's sad and hard, particularly at the end of this book series, for Katniss, for a story that's based on children going out and gladiatoring it up against each other. Like, how could it have ended without it being a massive tragedy? And also, that's something for contemporary young adult fiction, we do not see tragedies. We have them going off, them trying, they fight, and they conquer. And I think there's so much value to that. There's so much depth, so much worth to us experiencing people go through struggling and hard times and then making it out at the end, planting their flag and saying, I'm victorious at the end of a story. That's beautiful and powerful and so important. But being able to also see that when some things happen to us and it breaks us, that we can survive, we can be okay, and we also can be sad. And then it's okay to be broken sometimes. And when things that are traumatic and horrible do affect us so, that they are breaking, they are damaging to us, that we also can climb our ways out. We can endure. And we might be changed from it, but that's also okay. And I feel like there's a lot of sentiments of that in this book series. I just really, really love this book series. I think as someone who's been reading and reading and reading as much as I have over the past several years, like, I just see this as being something so profound and so unique. And though Hunger Games definitely has had its day and it's past, like, it's had its heyday, like, people were probably going to be seeing the very beginning of this video going, why would we be listening or talking about this book series because it's so old, it's so done? But I think that it's one that we shouldn't necessarily be forgetting in our reading because it's so powerful and so different than the young adult novels that we generally get exposed to. On a different note, all entirely, I know this has been like a somber sounding video because this is a somber topic because these are hard, rough books. Just some things that are like done creatively in it that I think is just really interesting is that Susan Collins, she was primarily a writer for film, either with TV or things like that. And in scripts, you write things in present tense. Now, in fiction, in prose, in novels, generally speaking, what we see is things happening in the past tense. And this small shift, I think, was really, really powerful, particularly because, one, it was done very, very well, but two, because it was so different, because we see the other. And the cool thing about writing and reading in present tense is things are happening that moment that we're reading them, that they're going on as we're exploring the story, and it feels like it's more like real time rather than this is a story that we're looking back on, and it just has a different flavor. And I think it makes some of the moments a little bit more real, a little bit more intense, because we're right there, right at the moment. And I think that's just really, really interesting and really cool, and I think it adds something unique and something powerful to this book series. Now, I think like I've hardly touched on the breadth and the depth that these books have, and maybe I'll go back in sometime and do videos on each of the different books and talk about some of the unique things in them. But overall, I just kind of wanted to have this general feeling of this book series and why I think this book series is significant and important, and some of the heavy elements and the natures that this book series has. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I think that there's a lot of things that you guys might have that are thoughts or feelings from this book series, maybe your different impressions or things that you've taken away from this. I'd really love to hear from you guys, so drop those thoughts in the comments below. That'd be super, super awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching this video. If you guys want to support me, I have a Patreon. It's at www.patreon.com/nerdmorning. Also, you can find me at nerdmorning on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you guys next time.